Hi, I'm Stephen S. Deknight, director of Pacific Rim Uprising, and you're watching Citizen Cinema.
Alright, you guys, so in today's episode, we got the director of Pacific Rim Uprising. This gentleman's worked on Daredevil, Angel, Smallville, just everything that's quality.
Everything that's geekdom.
He's worked on, that he's responsible for. Just Midas up in here. Okay?
Too kind.
So,
Steve, we really appreciate you
my
coming
pleasure.
down here.
Yes,
man.
my
bro,
pleasure, guys.
I'm having a lot of fun, even though I'm wearing a Power Ranger shirt, you know.
Not to start off on a different non-Pacific Rim foot, but Power Rangers, the movie, I thought that was much maligned. I got to tell you.
Yeah.
And I thought it was beautifully shot.
The new one, right?
Yeah, the new one.
Yeah, my neighbor's the Blue Ranger.
Oh, it really?
Yeah, a shout out to my brother R.J. Kyler.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, he's killing it right now on Showtime.
Some of you may not know, but the cinematographer for that was Matt Lloyd, who was my cinematographer for Daredevil, the first season.
Okay.
And he is absolutely brilliant.
Awesome.
I thought the movie looked fantastic.
It was so fun to watch.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautifully shot. What got you into the movie industry?
Interesting question. I started out trying to be a feature writer.
Okay.
When I graduated, I went to UC Santa Cruz for my undergraduate work, where I started out as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I was an okay actor, but I was no Dustin Hoffman. So I started writing plays. And then I went to UCLA for my grad work as a playwright.
Okay.
With the idea that I would always segue, hopefully, into movies. I love the stage, but trying to make a living as a playwright is a little tough these days. So I stuck around UCLA for an extra year to go through their screenwriting program. Graduated, thought it would take like 6 months and I'd be working in the movie business. I got a job as a ESL teacher, English as a second language, in the Valley at a private Japanese school.
Wow.
No, I don't speak Japanese at all.
Okay.
And I thought I'd be there 6 months at tops. I was there for almost 7 years before I got a break. I wrote one spec feature after another, and I just could not get any traction. And a friend of mine that I'd gone to UC Santa Cruz with called me up one day and said, I'm working on a pilot for an MTV show called Undressed. I don't know if you guys remember that show.
I heard about it when I was growing up in San Diego.
Yeah.
From some of the lesser...
It was basically a 4-night-a-week teen sex comedy.
Yeah.
Now, bizarrely produced by Roland Joffe, who did The Killing Fields and The Mission.
Really?
Yeah.
Very strange, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is very true.
That's crazy.
So my friend says, if it's picked up to series, I can get your stuff to Roland Joffe's people. So a few months later, he called up, said they've picked it up. Send me a TV script. I'd been writing features. The only TV script I had was a Deep Space Nine spec.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorite shows at the time. I'd wrote this spec called Giant, which was all about why the Ferengis are small.
Okay.
Basically, it starts off at Quark's in the bar, and somebody's hitting on Dax, and Worf gets upset. It's a Ferengi hitting on Dax. And he basically tells the Ferengi to get lost, and the Ferengi says, well, you're going to have to talk to my brother, and he turns around, and there's a Ferengi the size of Worf.
Yeah.
And it was all about the mythology of why they're small, that they didn't used to be small. They used to be the size of Klingons, but evolution made them smaller and shrewder. So that's all I had for this teen sex comedy.
Yeah.
So I sent it to him, and he asked me, do you have anything else? Isn't exactly the genre.
Yeah.
I said, no, that's it for TV. So he sent it to Roland Joffe's people, and the guy that read it, I'm not shitting you, was a huge Deep Space Nine fan.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay.
So that was my
awesome.
first huge break. So I got hired onto that show. I remember I took a 3-week leave of absence from my teaching job because I was only hired for 3 weeks as a trial run. And then they extended me 3 weeks and another 3 weeks. And then I ended up doing the show for about 4 years. 4 seasons. we shot it very quickly. It was a little over 2.5 years for 4 seasons. And in that final season, I thought, well, I've got a paying job. I should try to get a better agent. My agent was wonderful, but she was at the end of her career at a small actor agency. Very sweet, loved her to death. But so I decided to write another spec TV script. And my favorite show at that time was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Hell yes.
So I wrote a spec Buffy called Xander the Slayer. And that one was about why men can't be slayers. Xander absorbs Buffy's powers, and it goes straight to his head, and he ends up going bananas.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I sent it to. This is an interesting story. This will give everyone hope. A friend of mine had a really great agent, and so I sent it to her and said, "Hey, read this. If you like it, would you pass it on to your agent?" She read it, liked it, passed it on to the agent. About 2 weeks later, she called me up and said, "Hey, he said the team read it, they liked it, they didn't love it, so they're going to pass." And I'm like, well, I gave it a shot. So I gave it to my current agent, who was a feature agent. She knew literally 3 people in TV. One of them was the head of Joss Whedon's company, Mutant Enemy.
This is like
It's
random, like the odds.
I'm telling you.
It's stroke of luck.
It's so she sends it over to the head of Mutant Enemy at the time.
Yeah.
He reads it, likes it, calls me in for a meeting. I go in and meet, and he said, "Look, we really like your script. We want to talk to you about working on the animated show that we're developing." And I thought, "Oh, great, not exactly what I was thinking of, but fantastic." But he said, "Joss has to read the script first." So I go, "Okay." So I go back to my MTV job, and I'm waiting, and about a month later, I get a phone call. Joss Whedon would like to see you. Can you come over tomorrow? I'll be right there. So I go over to Santa Monica, where they were set up, and I sit down with Joss, and literally for a half hour, we talked about comic books and movies.
Just geeked out.
Just geeked out.
Yeah.
Because Joss is a huge geek as well.
In retrospect, I think he was feeling me out to see if I was one of his people.
Yeah, definitely.
And we definitely talked the same language. And at the end of that meeting, he goes, "Look, I know you're talking about the animated show, but would you like to come do an episode of the live-action show?" And I said, "Oh, well, hell yeah, I would."
Absolutely.
Of course.
So,
Wow.
literally, my job ends on Undressed, and I think a week later, I get the call to come start working on this freelance episode. So I do the freelance episode. I meet everybody over there. Great people. Jane Espenson, Doug Petrie, David Fury,
Okay.
Marty Noxon. Drew Goddard wasn't there
Wow.
yet. He came the next year. And so I finish this, and they invite me to the production meeting.
Yeah.
And for anybody out there who's ever heard of a production meeting, you basically you sit around, you go through the script, you get all the departments on board so everybody knows what you're doing and if there are any problems. So that lasts about an hour and a half, and afterwards Marty Noxon asked me to stick around for 5 or 10 minutes. And I thought they wanted a rewrite. And so I'm sitting there all by myself in this huge room. And an intern pops up and says, "Hey, Joss and Marty want to see you down on the set of the Magic Box." So I go down to the set. And this was really what I think was the defining moment of the start of my career is Joss said, "Hey, we like you. We like your writing. You want to join us full time?" And that was the moment that I felt like I was really plucked out of obscurity. And Joss literally gave me a career. So from there, just to condense the rest of the time up until features, I did 2 years on Buffy. The second year, my good friend Drew Goddard joined us.
Yeah.
After 2 years, that was season 6, Joss was doing Firefly, and he was moving Tim Minear from Angel to run Firefly. And he had a hole down there that he needed filled. So he asked me, he said, "Hey, I know you love Angel. Would you consider moving over to Angel for a promotion? And I hear you want to direct. Well, I'll give you a shot at directing." I said, "Yes." So I went down there. I got to play in that sandbox. And true to his word, he gave me the first shot at directing.
Okay.
So I directed 1 episode that year, then 2 episodes the next year. And in that final season 5, Drew Goddard came and joined us, and we really cemented our relationship. We wrote a bunch of scripts together, and I can't say enough good things about Drew.
All right.
After that wrapped up, Jeff Loeb, now the head of Marvel Television, who I knew because he was originally running the animated show, calls me up and said, "Hey, why don't you come join me over at Smallville?" And I said, "All right." So I went over to Smallville, had a great time with Miles Miller and Al Goff and the team over there.
Yeah.
Tom Welling, who is the nicest person I think I have ever met. Just fantastic. Michael Rosenbaum had me in tears every time I was near him. He's so goddamn funny.
So good.
That's why it's funny they became the Flash on the animated series.
Yeah. Oh, he's fantastic. Just a great time. So I spent 3 years there working my ass off.
Okay.
Directed one good episode, one horrible episode that will haunt me to my dying days. And then when that wrapped up, I thought, well, I've done the genre thing for a while. I want to do a musical. Because I'm a huge fan of the Dennis Potter musicals, the Pennies from Heaven, Singing Detective.
Okay.
And this is where my career took a hard left turn for about a year. I signed on to Viva Laughlin, if you remember that show. It was the Hugh Jackman musical on CBS for about 2 seconds.
Wow. I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, look it up. I think it was considered the... I remember when it came out, it was compared to Cop Rock. And they talked about how much they would prefer that Cop Rock came back instead of that. It was a bit of a disaster. I came in as co-executive producer, ended up co-running the show with Tyler Benzinger, the other co-executive producer. We aired after CSI on a special night on Thursday, lost 10 million viewers from CSI. A couple of days later on Sunday, we had episode 2. I think we lost another 10 million. Driving to Work Monday, canceled. Then the strike happened. I bumped into Joss Whedon on the picket line outside Fox, and he said, "Hey, I sold a show to Fox right before we started picketing, and as soon as this wraps up, I'd love for you to come work on it." That was Dollhouse.
Oh.
So I went to work on Dollhouse, wrote and directed the second episode, and during my time on Dollhouse, I had a very interesting deal where I had an out that I could leave if I got an offer to run my own show. So while I'm on Dollhouse, I get a call from my agent saying, "Hey, Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert just sold some Gladiator show to Starz. Are you interested?"
Oof.
I go, "Gladiator? Sure. I'll take that meeting. I love Sam Raimi."
Oh, yeah.
So I went in and had this meeting and found out it was Spartacus, which scared the shit out of me.
Huge fan, sir.
Oh, thank you.
I
Thank
got
you.
to interview Liam.
Oh, Liam's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
What a sweet guy. A funny story about Spartacus. So I go into this meeting with the executives, and Rob Tappert is in New Zealand where he's set up, and he's on speakerphone. So we have this meeting for about an hour. I find out it's Spartacus. I'm slightly concerned because I was a huge fan of the Kirk Douglas movie. But at the end of the meeting, they said, "Great, you're just what we're looking for. When can you start?" And I said, "About 2 months. I'm gearing up to direct an episode for Joss. So I've got to get that prepped. I've got to shoot it. I've got to go through post."
Yeah.
And they literally said, "We can't wait that long. Thanks for coming in." So I left. We parted ways. I was actually on set directing for Dollhouse when my agents popped up. And they said, "Hey, we just got a call from Starz, and they haven't found anybody else they liked as much as you. Or would you still be interested?" And I said, "Hell yeah." So I literally wrapped up post on Dollhouse on a Friday and started Spartacus on a Monday. And I didn't know anything about ancient Rome. All I knew was what I saw in the movies.
Yeah.
So I quickly did a bunch of reading. We hired a couple of Roman scholars, a couple of PhDs, which were invaluable. And then Rob Tappert and I just
went to town.
I remember we were talking about who the target audience was. And I think this was a huge lesson that I've always tried to keep near and dear to my heart. And we ultimately decided that we didn't care who the target was. We just wanted to make something that we really liked. So we threw out the window. We didn't care if it was 13 to 39-year-old males, We didn't care about any of that. And the surprising thing is, one of our strongest numbers were female, late 40s into 50s and 60s. Really dug the show. And it was such a great time. I mean, we had total creative freedom. We were just doing our thing, just having a blast.
You guys shot on Phantoms, right?
Yeah.
Those are sweet cameras.
They are.
Yeah, we built this rig. I forget what we called it. The decapitator? It was something ominous.
Dang.
It's awesome.
Because literally, it was on a cable from one end of the set to the other.
Okay.
And we'd fire up the Phantom, and it would shoot across set. And if you were in the way, off it goes. Yeah. But it was such a great time. And of course, we lost our star, Andy Whitfield, which was very difficult. Which was the main reason the show didn't go longer, is I wanted to finish telling the story, but I didn't want to milk it after that. It just felt like...
That's respectful. Yeah.
Some people, man, just don't get that.
Yeah, people still... I got to tell you, the most I get asked on Twitter is, spinoff, sequel, are you going to do some more? And I always say the same thing. I don't know how I would ever top that. It was just a special creative time for all of us. And I just feel anything else I do in that world would be a pale imitation. So I probably...
Writing in a bottle, you know?
Yeah, I probably won't return to that. So we wrapped that up, and I had an overall deal at Starz. So I had pitched them this show called Incursion, which was Band of Brothers meets Halo.
Ooh,
very hardcore, R-rated military show. Really military. I had a technical advisor... wanted to make it as true to life as possible, about a boots-on-the-ground sci-fi military show on other worlds. And we wrote, the first season was 8 episodes. We wrote the whole thing. We did a bunch of design elements. We were about 2 weeks away from casting when the plug got pulled because the show was a little bit too expensive. It's not dead. It's still on the burner.
Awesome.
It's still out there.
What happened to the Get Down, man?
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So I wrap up Incursion, and I wanted to take a little break to finally go back to my first love, features. So I took a couple of months off to write this idea I've been working on for a long time called The Dead and the Dying, which is a Hitchcockian thriller, 3 people in a house. Literally 3 people in a house. Any given, like half the movie, there's only one person on screen at any given time. And it was just something that I really wanted to do, an old-style suspense movie.
Okay.
So I finished writing that, and my agent sends it around, and one of the people that we sent it to is Mary Parent, the producer. And Mary and I had met years earlier. She had been a fan of Spartacus, so we got together, and I had pitched her this story years before. So Mary really liked it. We took it to Paramount, and we set it up at Paramount. And Paramount was absolutely fantastic to me. I have no hard feelings. They had like 2 notes, took me an hour to address. It wasn't any kind of development hell. But a movie that small, it was about an $8 million movie, is just, at the time, the big studios was just not built to really support that. So we kind of withered through neglect, not abuse. And we spent about 8 months trying to get it up and running and cast. And it was just taking forever. And this is where it gets to, how did I get into the film business?
Hey, keep going.
I took a little bit of time off from working on the movie. I suspended the deal for a year because Jeff Loeb again calls me up. Jeff Loeb and Drew Goddard call up and say, hey, we're in a bit of a jam. We're doing Daredevil. Drew Goddard is going off to do the Sinister Six movie, the Spider-Man movie. Can you come immediately and take over? And I said, no, I'm doing a feature. But they said, will you just read the first 2 scripts? So they sent me the first 2 scripts, and damn, they were fantastic.
Oh,
and
I love that show.
And fantastic. Yeah. And so I decided, I would put the movie on hold. And I went and I did Daredevil, and it was just a fantastic time. I mean, I've read Daredevil since I was a little kid, and we all loved the comics so much, and I loved what Marvel wanted to do, which was to make it darker. than the movies could go.
Yeah.
Grittier too.
Yeah.
Very boots on the ground action.
The
Yeah.
fighting was better.
Oh,
than I
that
expected.
hallway scene. That hallway
Episode
scene.
That,
Wow.
that was great. In Drew's original script, it said this is all one shot, and then when I took over, we did some massaging and some tweaking, and we had long conversations about how to do that hallway thing as all one shot because there's no room for a cameraman in there during the fight. So the brilliant team came up with, we built that hallway on set. It's a set. And they put the camera on a track in the ceiling. So the camera guys are actually on top of the roof of the set, moving it back and forth. And then we removed the track with CGI.
Wow.
And that's how it was done.
Sir,
Movie
that's
magic.
Movie
Yeah.
magic right
Movie
there.
Yeah.
And you'd never. It's so seamless
Yeah.
in the show. It really is.
And which just goes to show you that there's always a solution in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they
Even
spent
the hardest ones, you know.
yeah, and they spent a long time trying to figure that out.
But look, now it's one of the most talked about fights of all time.
Yeah, it was awesome. We were all so happy with that. So at the end of the first season, I unfortunately had to leave because I was still wanted to do this movie. I would have loved to have stayed around. I love the show so much.
Yeah.
So I went back to doing the movie, and we kept grinding away, trying to get it cast. And one day, Mary Parent calls me up and said, maybe this wasn't meant to be your directorial debut. So I thought, my producer's pulling out. It's all going to hell. And then she said, what do you think about Pacific Rim 2?
Ooh.
Hell,
And I said,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, how could I say no?
of course, bro.
Was I prepared to do a movie that big? Absolutely not. Can you say no? Nobody would say no to that kind of opportunity.
And Guillermo's world as well.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Guillermo fan. I think he's absolutely brilliant. So then I had to meet Thomas Tall, who was running Legendary at the time, then the Legendary executives, and finally I had to go meet Guillermo to get everybody's blessing. And after that happened, then it was a 2-year sprint. Usually a movie like this takes 3 years. We only had 2 years to do it.
Yeah.
So it was intense. It was nonstop, 7 days a week for 2 years. But that's how I fell into the movie business.
All right. Well, I mean, that takes up most of my time for this Citizen Cinema segment. I messed that up. All right, guys. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Citizen Cinema. Steve, tell everybody can check out your Twitter and your social media.
Yeah, find me on Twitter. I closed up Facebook's due to nefarious election shit.
Yeah.
But you can find me on Twitter at Steven Deknight. Come ask questions as long as you're not extremely rude.
You're so cool with the
I will
fans,
answer
man.
everything.
Much respect. And again, this is Mike Fallon with my co-host, Bond.
How's it going?
I'm good, baby. Anyway, we'll catch you guys next time.
All right.
So that's your
All right.
segment.
All right, let's do it. All right.